A production fee for your Hometown Health Connection was made by Buffalo Healthy Living Magazine and its sponsors. The statistics I'm going to share with you from the New York State Department of Health are stunning. Approximately 12% of residents aged 12 and older experience a substance use disorder, either addiction or abuse. Close to 2 million New Yorkers, 1.77 million adults, 156,000 youth ages 12 to 17, have a substance abuse problem. Sadly, here in Erie County, almost 300 residents have died from an opioid overdose, and that was just in the last year. Analysis from the Erie County Department of Health epidemiologists found about 3/4 of opioid overdose deaths in 2022 occurred in or in close proximity to the individual's residence. Deaths for the 40 to 59-year-old population, they've increased. The proportion of people of color in opioid overdose death data has increased from 10 to 28%. Interestingly, the population of white persons in opioid death data has decreased a little bit down to 68%. All of that said, it's still a very important topic to talk about. And on this edition of your Hometown Health Connection, we'll discuss the role of mental health in supporting and mitigating and treating substance abuse. I'm John DeSciullo, and welcome to the program. Let me introduce our guests from Horizon Health Services, the leading substance use disorder rehab and mental health services provider in Western New York and in Buffalo. They are Elizabeth Hole, Patrick Greene, and Shacarah Henry. Let's meet them and find out what they do at Horizon Health Services and how they help others. So we'll start. Elizabeth, what is your role at Horizon?
Hi, thanks for having us. I am Director of Outpatient Operations. So I supervise the outpatient clinics from a personnel and budgetary perspective. I'm also a clinician.
All right. How long have you been there?
Coming up on 10 years.
All right. You've seen a lot. Patrick, tell us what you do.
I am a program director for one of the clinics at Horizon. And so my role is essentially try to make sure everything's working smoothly and everyone's kind of doing their job.
Clinic that people can come to on a day-to-day basis.
That's right,
Yeah.
right. So I work with both administrative and clinical staff.
And Shacarah, where do you work and what do you do?
Yeah, so I'm a clinical supervisor at the Boulevard Outpatient Clinic, so I supervise counselors along with Pat here. I also do presentations, speaking engagements in the community to raise awareness about mental health, substance use recovery.
Let's talk about, Shacarah, we'll start with you, certain times of the year. You know, whether it be the normal everyday routine time of the year or sometimes there's holiday times. What times of the year do you see the most influx of people coming into Horizon?
You know, we see people coming into Horizon all the time. I think it's important to note that holidays, anniversaries, birthdays, anytime where there is a celebration, we can see an increase in people's mental health and substance use challenges. But really all times of year, anniversaries, reunions, losses, all of that, we can have people coming in for more support.
I'll offer this out to everybody. You know, at these times of the year when people come together for whatever, whether it's holidays or even, like you said, family functions, are there triggers, are there things that people do to maybe fall back into bad behavior or something that might begin bad behavior?
Absolutely. I think it's normal to think about holidays as a time of joy and celebration, but the reality is that for many people, it also brings up traumatic memories, thoughts about loss of a loved one, and so people may gravitate toward masking those feelings, and one of the ways in which they do that is through using drugs and alcohol.
Another thing that happens, especially with holidays, is that there are a lot of traditions associated with the holiday season. And so oftentimes those traditions are connected or linked with substance use or some type of partying that's happening. And, you know, that can be very difficult for somebody that is kind of moving towards a place of recovery. They can almost feel obligated to continue the tradition, even though it might not be helpful for them.
And maybe even more difficult if they have not admitted to their family that they have an issue.
Absolutely.
And they're sort of masking that, but trying to fit in, so to speak, with whatever celebration there is. Have you seen that, Patrick?
Yeah. So what ends up happening is that people kind of straddle, where they'll be like on one side of recovery and then the other side trying to fit in. So it's important to remember that someone that is ready for recovery doesn't mean that their family or their friends are also on the same page. And so oftentimes you kind of see this happening. And then the person gets stuck, they get torn in between these two worlds, and they try to make everybody kind of happy, and that really puts a lot of pressure on the individual and ultimately makes it worse for them.
Yeah. Now throw this out there, because maybe the converse of that, should families, if they know that somebody is dealing with, substance abuse issue or some concern, but even a mental health concern, have more respect to say, we're not going to have alcohol at our party, or we're not going to do certain things. I mean, Shacarah, maybe that's something that would speak to that conversation, that other family members need to be respectful of the person who's going through those issues.
Absolutely, and I think it's a hard thing as well, because a lot of times we see people saying, well, it's not my problem, so why do I have to change up my party or my tradition to accommodate someone else? And so that's where we can step in as well to help the people that we work with, as well as their family members, to understand, to educate and bring awareness to the impact that some of these times of year can have on people, and how do we just be intentional and allow everyone to be involved without anyone feeling uncomfortable.
Elizabeth, do you see more people coming to Horizon or seeking the services during holiday times of the year?
I think so. I think anytime you see a significant change in daylight, so summer months when we get a lot of sun, that can cause mental health symptoms to come out. People have difficulty sleeping, and once your sleep cycle is dysregulated, it can cause a lot of problems. Conversely, as we have less and less daylight, people can find themselves isolating more, spending more time indoors, feeling more depressed.
That's an interesting statistic and an interesting point that I had never heard of before, that the time spent indoors or outdoors can significantly impact, certainly the activity, but I didn't know from a substance abuse perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people who are susceptible to mood disorders will notice the change in seasons.
We're talking about substance abuse in the statistics earlier. We talked about some of that. Let's maybe pivot that a little bit now to mental health and some of the concerns. Patrick, I'll go to you. How does that play in, again, to the holiday situations when somebody has some concerns of a mental health issue?
So when you think about the holidays, there's an expectation that it's a joyous occasion. And what if somebody is also struggling during this joyous occasion? There's guilt, there's shame, and that tends to isolate the person, and they feel even worse. It's almost like they don't feel entitled to be struggling. And that in of itself, just that piece right there makes it so difficult to be dealing with a mental health disorder during, the holiday season.
Yeah.
And if I can add, it's also people feel this pressure to show up in a certain way or to follow through with these expectations of, I have to see this person or I have to be at this family gathering, even if maybe they're around people that make them feel really uncomfortable and people that might trigger their mental health, but they feel like they still have to do it. It's this expectation because it's some type of holiday or celebration. And I feel like that's where we can help people to understand that they do not have to meet these expectations. They can spend these times how they want to. Conversely, it also brings up years past, the mistakes that people have made that have maybe isolated them from their families. And so then they feel alone.
You had mentioned earlier about the idea, what if the family kind of chips in and supports?
Yeah.
So something happens, especially when when someone's struggling with like a mental health disorder, they will feel like a burden. And so even if family is willing to help, they will feel like that's wrong. And they won't oftentimes even accept the help, or even if the help is offered, they'll feel guilty because the family now is kind of altering their approach because of them. So it's almost like you can't win either way.
This is a lot of pressure, I would think. And then Elizabeth, on your team at Horizon, when people come to see you during these times of the year, how do you counsel them on how to get through this time when they say, I really don't want to be with my family? You know, there's an old adage, you can pick your friends but not your family.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you counsel them on that part based on what Patrick just said?
Well, as much as possible, I think it's helpful and effective to involve families in treatment. That's not always going to be possible for a variety of reasons, but when we can, we like to help families understand the perspective of their loved one and help them maybe interact differently in a way that's more supportive. We also have ancillary services to help people through difficult times. So things like someone who's dealing with an addiction might want to be linked with, in addition to their counselor, a peer specialist. This is someone with lived experience who's dealt with addiction, who can really be an extra set of ears to say, hey, I've been there. I know what you're going through. Here's what helped me.
I was on the board of the Alzheimer's Association for a period of time, and something that I learned, an interesting statistic, more people get involved after the holiday times because they connect with their families and they see that mom and dad aren't doing so well. Would you say the same in this case, where somebody as a family member may identify that one of their loved ones maybe has a substance abuse issue? And Shacarah, at that point, how would you work with them, if it's at all possible, to say, like the advice you would give to somebody who's watching, to say, if you see a family member who you think is addicted and not fessing up, how would you go about counseling them so that they could get help?
Well, I mean, the first and foremost is if you notice something, call. It never hurts to call. We have so many people answering the phones with this experience to be able to talk you through what are your options. And then really we have family services, right? We have family peer support services and services dedicated for family members to get that education and awareness of how to help their loved one. And as Liz said, we also really try our best to incorporate families into care. So that's working with the clients that we're working with in sessions together to help manage some of the issues. And I do want to point out that we use the word family a lot, and we know that family means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So we're not just talking about biological mom, dad, and so on. It's anyone that our clients consider to be their family.
That's an interesting point. You know, some people will confide in a friend who they consider more like a brother than their brother.
Right. To your point, we can't choose our family. We can choose our friends and who we allow into our lives.
You mentioned connecting, and we talked before the program. In fact, we want to make sure the number's up on the screen as long as it can possibly be. You can connect at any time with Horizon.
Yes, and we believe it is so important to have access for community members at the moment that they need and want it. So what we've done is opened up some of our clinics to offer walk-in appointments at the moment that someone needs it. So at our Niagara Falls Boulevard location, we have 5-day-a-week walk-in appointments available. So having access for the community is very important.
So the number, and I'm going to read it because it'll be up on the screen, 716-831-1800. And that is one number, but you had mentioned also that Crisis Services is another agency that you intersect with. How does that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we collaborate really closely with other organizations in the area. We all have the same goal. It's to have a healthy community. If someone is in need of help late at night, on the weekends, and maybe our clinic isn't open or their therapist isn't available, they can outreach and speak to someone at Crisis Services and get that more immediate support.
Well, as our conversation continues here on your Hometown Health Connection, we're going to speak more with our guests from Horizon, and we're going to talk a little bit more about opioid addiction and some of the other things that you've heard about in the community, like Narcan, and other ways that Horizon will help you and maybe a member of your family or your friend's family. We'll be back with your Hometown Health Connection right after this. Buffalo Healthy Living Magazine is a free, full-color magazine distributed throughout Western New York. Now, more than ever, as we all want our families and friends to be safe and well, Buffalo Healthy Living Magazine is devoted to health, fitness, and nutrition for people of all ages. It's a great read and also has great recipes. Pick up Buffalo Healthy Living Magazine all over our hometown or go online anytime at buffalohealthyliving.com. Welcome back to your Hometown Health Connection. We're talking with Elizabeth Hole, Patrick Greene, and Shacarah Henry about the surge in substance use and abuse and how Horizon Health Services can help you and your family or your friends with these problems and get through difficult times. Let's talk, Elizabeth and Patrick and Shacarah, about harm reduction.
Sure.
What is that?
So harm reduction is a philosophy. Historically, I think in the treatment community, people have felt, I need to be completely sober or completely abstinent. I can't use anything. And the reality is we want to meet with people at whatever stage of change they're in and really understand what their goal is. So for one person, their goal might be to stop using opiates, but for now they want to continue using alcohol. So the objective is to create as much safety for a person and reduce as much harmful behavior as possible.
Sort of like cold turkey, so to speak.
Right. So if you think about it this way, there's a function for every behavior. And for a lot of folks, when they're using, it's also doing something for them. But it's also harming them at the same time. And the idea of complete elimination puts them almost like stepping out on a ledge without a net. And that's terrifying for a lot of people. They have no idea what they're going to do. And so there's a lot of resistance to even begin recovery because it's like, I can't go from 0 to 100. That's not realistic. So they do nothing. Harm reduction is meeting them where they're at. And they're like, okay, if you're able to go to 5, let's start at 5. We're on the way to 100, but we're going to start at 5.
And I think people don't always realize there are medications available to support people's recovery goals. Certainly we see a lot on the news and in the community information about naloxone, which is Narcan, but there are also medications to help people reduce cravings for things like even alcohol.
I saw a program recently on the news about a Narcan dispensary that a local firehouse has right in front of their facility. You know, it's free. And Shacarah, we're seeing that now more and more, that's become part of the culture.
Yeah, there's a lot of options and strategies for harm reduction, and the community is embracing it more. However, we still do see a lot of stigma around mental health and substance use recovery, which can hinder these options for harm reduction throughout the community, which is why we work so hard to build a relationship with the community through speaking engagements, presentations, to raise that awareness and try to help reduce the stigma. The best thing that I've ever heard, like the best definition for harm reduction, is that we're meeting people where they're at, but we're not leaving them there.
Interesting. Let's talk about the age of the individuals that you work with. You said something very interesting about the age. I think our audience would be fascinated to hear at what point this begins.
So we actually treat individuals ages 3 and up for mental health. We are starting to see substance use in younger populations. We've always seen substance use in high school, college-age populations, but it's starting to creep into the lower grades as well. We're working really closely with schools throughout the community to be able to offer counseling services right where a student is to kind of reduce as many barriers as possible.
Let's talk about some of the things that somebody may use maybe as we move along the age range into middle school. You know, when I was younger growing up, like cigarettes were, you know, the thing. You try a cigarette, and I never smoked, and thank God I never did. But alcohol, another sort of gateway piece, cannabis, you know, are those still in that middle school range where people get introduced to substances that could become harmful for them, if not controlled? I'll ask of everybody. Yeah.
Well, we have seen in this community, opiate use is on the rise. Vaping is very popular among middle school and up. People are getting vapes from other kids, sometimes younger than they are, which is really kind of scary. And finding that they're mixing things together without fully knowing what is in their, like what they're using, which is increasing their risk naturally. We still do see marijuana, alcohol being used. People are mixing alcohol with energy drinks, which was a popular trend and has become a popular trend again, which is very risky.
In the drug supply today, when you think about 10, 20, 30 years ago, is so different. It's really unprecedented. You don't know what's in a pill because synthetic opiates are being put in pills, pressed into pills. And so people might take something thinking they know what it is, and they actually don't. And we're seeing overdose and death because of that. So another aspect of harm reduction, as Shacarah was talking about, is the ability to even test your drugs. So if you're going to use, can you at least use safely? So there are things like xylazine test strips, fentanyl test strips that allow a person to test what they're consuming before. That way they're making an informed choice when they're using.
And we're seeing fentanyl laced with everything.
Cocaine,
Yeah.
methamphetamine, I mean,
Yeah.
things you wouldn't
Marijuana.
anticipate finding a synthetic opiate, it's in there.
And so at this point now, it's almost like you're rolling the dice. You have no idea what you're taking. It's really dangerous.
And I've heard that with fentanyl, particularly, just the slightest little bit can be fatal to an individual.
And you don't know how your system is going to respond to fentanyl. So you could have a much more stronger reaction to it. So it could be more fatal for some people than others. It's just, you don't know. So it's really, really difficult and dangerous.
As I said, growing up, things would stair step in theory to other things. Is that still, Elizabeth, where you see things going? Vaping, I remember vaping when that was a big thing when it started, that it was supposed to replace cigarette use.
Yeah.
And now it seems like vaping itself has become just as harmful as cigarette use. Do you see these things stair-stepping potentially for other things? And is opioid sort of the last step, or cocaine or heroin, God forbid?
Absolutely. We see younger people using more and more mind-altering substances. I mean, nicotine is highly addictive. And so when you talk about a young developing brain starting to use nicotine, they're looking for a quick relief from some sort of feeling. You ingest nicotine, you feel relaxed, right? And so it's setting the foundation where they're sort of primed for other methods of getting rid of bad feelings.
Dopamine.
Dopamine, absolutely. We're surrounded by sources that surge our dopamine. When you're online and you're scrolling Facebook or Reddit or TikTok, you're getting a surge of dopamine. And so people become accustomed to needing that hit. And absolutely, it can start to translate into really dangerous substances.
And your brain doesn't distinguish where it's getting dopamine. So it doesn't say, oh, this is a good dopamine source, this is a bad source. It just says, dopamine, give me some more. And so the more you get, the more the brain wants it. And so it really puts them, especially young folks, in a situation where they're just at greater risk.
And at a certain point, whatever that thing is that is bringing that surge of dopamine becomes the top priority. It will become above anything else, above eating, above your friends, above your family. It takes that top slot, and so that's all that you're ever looking for.
You hear that a lot with addicts, that they unfortunately sometimes morph into doing whatever it takes to get that high or get that hit. So if somebody is going through this, how does Horizon help them? What do you do when somebody comes into the clinic? Patrick, just walking right in the door and saying, I need help. How do you deal with that?
Well, we want to treat the person individually. Like, everyone has their own unique story. So we're not entirely sure exactly what is happening with that individual. So we want to start there. We want to get them in for an assessment and begin to understand what is happening to them. And then based upon that, we're going to offer recommendations that's going to be the most helpful and set them up for success.
And let's talk about mental health. We talked about now substance abuse, but if somebody has a mental health issue, what do you do at Horizon? Sometimes they need beds, they need to escape a little bit too.
Absolutely. What Patrick was saying, everyone starts with a really comprehensive assessment. Tell me your story, what's happening? And from there, we can help make collaborative decisions about what kind of support they'll need. Not everyone's the same. Someone might be okay with just individual therapy every week, whereas someone else might be facing triggers consistently and using more than they want to, and they need something more intensive. So in the outpatient world, we have intensive outpatient services for both substance use disorders and mental health disorders. And that's really going to allow someone rapid access to their counselor, to a prescriber, and also to group therapy, which is a great way to give and receive support from others who are going through similar experiences.
The mental health IOP program, we started that around 2017. And since then, we have treated close to 600 people that needed extra stabilization. And that was what was needed. And then once they got that, they went back to normative care and continued on their treatment.
We're looking at Horizon Health Services, and a connection is 831-1800, number on the screen, 716-831-1800. Shacarah, in the remaining moments we have left, and everybody, about 4 minutes, let's talk about some success stories of people that you've worked with, because I have to believe you get connected to the folks that come through. And when somebody is able to kind of kick their addiction or get through life and become a role model for others, I'm sure that really is very inspiring to you.
It truly is, and I love when people reach out to me after they've completed treatment successfully and have talked to me about all the things that they've gained in their life or gotten back because they have been able to manage and overcome their substance use challenges or learn how to manage their mental health effectively. Because really the most important service we provide is a safe space. We might be the only place, the only refuge for someone. They might not have that anywhere else in their life. So we help them to build a healthier lifestyle, healthy connections. And I get emails of, I have a husband now, I moved to this place, I've created this life for myself that I've always been looking for, and it started when I walked through the door.
I want to look at success this way, that success is if you are able to walk in that door and ask for help. So we are faced with success stories every day. That sometimes the hardest thing to do is ask for help, but it can be transformative if you do.
They say that the breakthrough is when somebody actually admits they have a need and they make that move.
And you don't even have to admit everything. You can just have enough to call. Just if you have, that's all you have, then just do that. You don't need to have everything lined up. Just take one step, and that can make a huge difference.
Elizabeth, I would think that people who have gone through those struggles can become inspirational to others. Have you seen that with what you do at Horizon?
Absolutely. In fact, many people who recover successfully often want to give back in the field themselves. And so, we have people in recovery who work at Horizon, and it's so important to have their perspective and their lived experience in helping us as providers, but also in helping the patients we work with.
Well, thank you for the work that you're doing at Horizon, in their clinics, in the various locations, and for what you do in interacting with those that you help and have helped. Elizabeth, Patrick, and Shacarah from Horizon Health Services, thank you for joining us and providing us with important information and advice for those battling with substance abuse and mental health support in Western New York. We're going to have that phone number on the screen and some more information. Horizon Health Services helps over 22,000 Western New Yorkers each year as a proven leader in behavioral health and addiction treatment. Voted the best place to work for 15 consecutive years. Horizon has over 20 Western New York locations with services that include counseling, residential treatment, detox, and stabilization, family and recovery support for people of all ages. Telemedicine services are also available. Now, for more information on how you can get help, they're online at horizon-health.org. That's horizon-health.org, or you can reach out by calling the number on the screen, area code 716-831-1800. I'm John DeSciullo. Thanks for watching. Be safe and be well. Production fee for the preceding presentation of Your Hometown Health Connection was made by Buffalo Healthy Living Magazine and its sponsors.